The question is, what is better for deadlift assistance, performing front squats or performing the opposite style deadlift to the one that you're currently using? I think the answer starts with technique. If you want to improve at performing a specific skill, then you need to practice that skill. So if you want to become a better squatter, then you need to squat. If you want to become a better deadlifter, then you need to deadlift. So obviously, once you've mastered your particular technique, which is going to vary from person to person, but once you've mastered your specific technique around your body's genetics and your leverages, then you can begin addressing your weak points and selecting appropriate assistance exercises based on those weaknesses. So beginning with the sumo deadlift, because the sumo deadlift is primarily, because of the wider stance, more of a hip dominant movement, I don't think the front squat is going to carry over as much to the sumo deadlifter as perhaps performing wide stance box squats or simply wide stance competition squats, Zercher squats, etc. I also don't think that the conventional deadlift is necessarily going to really help the sumo deadlifter that much, simply because, again, the feet are in such a different position. Sure, you're going to strengthen a lot of the muscles that go along with deadlifting, but it's not as sport specific as perhaps doing things with a wider stance would be. So that comes back into play of when you select an assistance exercise, you want it to be, closely resemble the competition lift as much as possible. So a wide stance squat is obviously going to resemble a sumo deadlift more than a conventional deadlift, or a front squat would resemble a sumo deadlift. Oppositely, with the conventional deadlifters, because your stance is more narrow and because it's more of a quad and back dominant movement, I think the front squat is one of your very best choices of assistance exercises for the conventional deadlift. As you can see, the front squat very closely resembles the conventional deadlift. And as far as performing sumo deadlifts to help your conventional, again, I think it depends on where your particular weakness is. If you have a weakness at the lockout, perhaps that could be a hip issue or an upper back issue, and that's where, perhaps getting better at the sumo deadlift might help your conventional a little bit. But I think you also need to go back to technique, setup position, start position, etc. Perhaps your weaknesses could be addressed by fixing your startup or your setup. The second part of that question is, would one be better than the other for overall training effect? And I think the answer is performing front squats is going to be better for an overall training effect, because you're also going to get a bigger bang for your buck performing front squats, as it's going to carry over into your regular squats, more so than performing an opposite style deadlift is going to carry over to your squats. So I know that that's kind of complicated, but anyhow, in short, I think the front squat is a more appropriate choice for the conventional deadlifter, for overall training effect, and for helping the conventional deadlift. And for the sumo deadlifter, I think you need to stick with exercises that more closely resemble the sumo deadlift, like wide stance squatting, Zercher squatting, different various pulls with a wide stance, etc. I think that's going to give you the biggest return on your investment. The question is, how important is shoulder strength to improving bench press strength, or to improving your bench press? Again, referring back to previous Q&As and some of my writings and talks, etc., get better at bench pressing, improve your technique. All that being said, I'll start with shirted benchers. For those of you that are bench pressing in shirts, the two most important muscle groups, in my opinion, would be your triceps, first and foremost, and your lats and upper back. More often, shirted benches are missed because you weren't able to control the weight on the negative, and when you lose it at the chest, it's usually because you flattened out or there was a technical issue, your lats weren't strong enough to keep you secure in the bottom position, and the other obvious most frequent place of failure in the bench press while wearing a shirt is at lockout. So if you want to get better at lockout, you obviously need to train your triceps. So triceps and upper back are the two most important muscle groups, in my opinion, for shirted benchers. For the raw bencher, I think shoulder strength is crucial. I think it's really, really important, specifically through the transition phase of coming off the chest, going through the midpoint to lockout. I think shoulders are really important. I think they also play a huge role in stability, in controlling the weight both coming down and coming up. So I think performing exercises that most closely resemble the bench press are obviously going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. But this inquiry also asked about performing military presses and different shoulder raises for hypertrophy and how large of a role that plays. I think the military press is an excellent choice of assistance exercise for the raw bencher. I think it really hammers the front delts, the medial delts, and the triceps, and since it sort of looks like a bench press in that you're locking the weight out with a barbell, you're going to get a good carryover. And it's always a good thing to create more general hypertrophy in a specific muscle group, because more often than not, the larger your muscle group is and the larger the cross-sectional area of your muscle fibers are, the stronger you're going to be. That's not always the case, as evidenced by many, many elite lifters who appear to be pretty small and scrawny, but who can hoist amazing weights. But generally speaking, the larger the muscle group is, the stronger it's going to be. So by all means, you can implement some hypertrophy work into your shoulder routine to help with your bench press strength as well.